Satan wants to have you. He wants to steal your soul. He wants to take you. These people don't believe in God anymore, and they want you to be just like them, miserable. Bushman then takes that to publish Rough Stone Rolling, which is really an anti-Latter-day Saint book. That book has caused many people to wander and lose their faith because there's a lot of lies in it. Richard Bushman literally quoted out of context something from Lucy Mack Smith's own history to promote an idea that was very false. All right, today's episode, I'm really excited to be talking to you about Faith Crisis 2, Behind Closed Doors. This is really, really fun because if you like the first one, or if you didn't see it, you should go back and watch it. But this is another book that is very faith promoting. It helps you to better understand if the church didn't lie about its history, then what happened to it? You've got to listen to this. You've got to read this book. It is great. And I'm going to be quoting and sharing things out of it. One day I hope to be able to interview the author, Hannah Stoddard, because it's just great. So anyways, take a listen and let me know what you think. A lot of this is about what was going on with Leonard Arrington and all those that he taught and inspired to be like him and to follow this method of looking at church history through a lens of interpretation and pulling in sources that were traditionally ignored. And they were ignored, just so you know, because they were from sources that were not credible. But to say, no, we're going to pretend they're credible. Why? Well, because they cast a shadow on all these things. And the truth is, people like Leonard and those he taught and followed him, they have a dislike for how clean, squeaky clean and beautiful the history of the church is. We don't have to buy into a concept that the church and its members and its leaders were perfect, were without flaw. That's not the case at all. We have to, though, support the declarations of prophets and even of the Lord through Revelation, that the things they gave us were truly from Him, like the Revelations really were pure, unadulterated from Jesus Christ. Also, that Joseph Smith was a man whose character was really really wonderful. Above what's the word I'm looking for? Not above report. Above basically, it did not need. He was of such a character that you did not have to be constantly correcting him. He was a very incredible man. And yeah, there were people who didn't like him. There was a lot of people who fell away from him because of their own pride and issues they had with him. But ultimately, he was doing God's work, and he did a lot of great, amazing things. But our history and our founding is not as sketchy and weird as you might think, as you are now led to believe it is. Now, I just want to start off because this is way, way, way deep in the book, page 264. But I want to start off with this because this presents a really important issue. This is really alarming. It says, our best current assessment of available evidence indicates that we may be losing 75% of millennials in the church today. This means that for the first time in church history, roughly 3/4 of the age group between 25 and 35 could be currently renouncing their faith, a staggering statistic and sign of the time. Leaving parents, leaders, and even those not of our faith asking the question, what is happening? We are witnessing a mass proliferation, even pandemic, of faith crisis as never before. And the authors here go on to explain, this really is coming down to this corruption, this falsifying of how our church, of church history, and trying to cast a darker light and greater confusion and even ideas that contradict the truth as proclaimed by other church leaders and even the church leaders themselves. It creates a sense of confusion and I believe I'm a millennial, and I've seen a lot of my peers fall away or to become so disenfranchised by the church because of these crazy ideas about our history. that they no longer attend, or at least in their heart they are no longer active, though they might attend. And then pretty quickly, or over time, it erodes to the point where they no longer attend. These are people that Satan wants to have so much. You have to think about this. Satan wants to have you. That's what we understand, right? He wants to steal your soul. He wants to take you. Why? Because you will be a disruptor to his kingdom if you remain faithful. We are meant to be a disruptor to his kingdom because we are supposed to build up God's kingdom, which is in exact opposition to the kingdom of the devil. And the Lord's prophets are glorious and wonderful people. They have their flaws. But the founding of Christ's church in Christ's day is not sketchy. In the Restoration days back in 1830 and the preceding years to that and after that, it's not sketchy. I mean, there can be things that you might consider sketchy, but when you see the hand of the Lord on all this, you recognize, okay, you have to answer the questions like, did the gospel really come from a boy whose family was practicing magic and who was gold digging and looking in sort of a peepstone and all sorts of stuff? These ideas and lies that were crafted by those detractors that hated Joseph Smith and his family. And you have to come to realization: is there greater light and beauty to the founding, or is there not? Because that can really mess with your faith. I will say, before I say anything else, because I don't want to take too long here, that is, there is one blessing I found throughout all of the lies and the cloudiness, the darkness that Leonard Arrington and those who follow after his way of thinking, his progressiveness. The blessing that's come out of this is that it has helped Latter-day Saints to try to at least focus on one really, really important aspect, and that is, this is Christ's church. I believe in Christ. I know he is my Savior. Now, it's made them shakier on, is Joseph Smith really a prophet? If he was, I don't know if I really like the man. And that's not a good place to be in, because Christ loved that man and he sacrificed more than you will ever understand, or I will ever understand. We need to have a better appreciation and true understanding, unadulterated understanding of the Lord's prophet. So the good thing that's come out of this is it's a lot of people to say, you know what, I can still believe even when doubts arise, because more doubts in the future will always arise. But if you can then find the glorious truths, facts, historical experiences that are wonderful and faith promoting, that's a good place to be in. So that's the question, like, what do we do about the situation where the millennials are falling away? What do we do? What do we do? Well, we end up with this situation where we have to reconcile the fact that even today, despite many good things going on, there's still misinformation being promoted out there, being published by the church because of the historians that they've hired who follow in this pattern of making credible sources that are illegitimate, that are purely liable, made up. I want to give you an example. So Leonard Arrington is, this is from the book, in chapter 15, Leonard Arrington is the church historian, and he comes up with this idea that they should make a giant new volume, church history volume, for the 150th anniversary. Let me read. It says, when Arrington first became historian in 1972, his close friend and future author of Rough Stone Rolling, Richard Bushman, proposed a new history series. The concept evolved into the sesquicentennial history and was initially projected to comprise 15 to 16 volumes. So this is going to be a huge project. And this is kind of an exciting idea, especially for any church members who could think, oh, we could get even more history. This would be awesome, like this long, in-depth overview. But it's not as good as you might think it is, because these are people who want to alter the history of the church to make it into something that it is not, because that is at least that's Arrington's purpose and goal, and those who followed after him, they've done a pretty good job of that. It's so bad. Let me just say this. This is actually a paragraph above. What they produced was so bad that the church put an end to it. Darn fly. You got to ignore the flies. When kids leave the doors open, flies come into the house. But it says, in 1978, when with the church trapped in a legal quandary, Elder Gordon B. Hinckley spoke with the church legal department attorneys to explore a lawful means of annulling the agreements the church had entered into to publish the sesquicentennial history volumes, an extensive project that had been conducted under the direction of Leonard Arrington. So President Hinckley's trying to put a stop to this. But why? Because they're writing some stuff that's not true. Well, let me keep reading. To complete the project, Arrington engaged several liberal New Mormon history scholars and intellectuals, including Richard L. Bushman, T. Edgar Lyon, Eugene E. Campbell, Thomas G. Alexander, James B. Allen, and R. Davis Bitten, including, so there's more obviously, commissioning them to write a new history for the church to publish in commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the April 6, 1830 organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This would be a really great accomplishment for these historians because they want to create a new history like I just read, and they really mean that they want this to be totally different than the faith-promoting real history of the church that shows that God's hand was in the making of this church every step of the way. There were great miracles that took place. This is an exciting time and a trialing time, but they want to present it differently. So it says storm clouds began to gather around the ambitious project as manuscripts were submitted to general authorities for approval. So Richard Bushman then goes on to John Dehlin's Mormon Stories podcast, which is an anti-Latter-day Saint podcast purposely created to cause people to lose their faith and to leave the church altogether and even to leave God altogether. These people don't believe in God anymore. And they want you to be just like them, miserable. So Richard Bushman, the author of Rough Stone Rolling, talks about this whole thing with John Dehlin. Go figure. Leonard Arrington, so this is him talking, Bushman. Leonard Arrington asked me to write the first volume of the projected 16-volume history of the church. And the interesting thing is the first volume, which was Milt Bachman's The Heavens Resound, had gone through the committees, had been read by everybody who had read it, and they were rolling along. Then came along my volume, Joseph Smith and the Beginnings of Mormonism. And after it was cleared by Leonard and all his group, so all the progressive historians, it went up to some unknown group of general authorities to read. Never got a word back concerning it. But one day, Leonard and I happened to be in Salt Lake, and we were called in to meet with Lowell Durham, and this is where they were told, sorry, we got your papers and stuff, and the church has decided we're not publishing this 16-volume history of the church that you are producing. Well, why? Because they are discovering this is basically craftily, subtly written anti-Mormon or anti-Latter-day Saint history. That's really awful. And you go before this period, and I believe it was 1976, this book talks about, I think it's called The Story of the Latter-day Saints that Arrington wrote with someone else. And it is so bad. Remember, it's subtle and crafty, but it's meant to discount the experiences in the hand of God in the creation and formation of his church and the leading of the saints. It's so bad what they wrote that Ezra Taft Benson and others call in to meet with him and say, basically, what the heck did you just write? And they tell him this is basically anti-Mormon literature. But it's too late. We published this. The church published it, and we can't stop the publishing. We've already paid for the whole thing, right? So I really want Latter-day Saints. This is really, really bugs me because this is a really false idea that I used to buy into, and now I know it's not true. It's pretty bogus. And that is, if the church's stamp is on there, the Church of published by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, then it has been approved. It is great. The general authorities approve of it. It is what it ought to be. It is of God. That's really what they're saying. That's not true at all. These general authorities, they have a lot of responsibility on their plate, and they rely upon those they delegate to allow other activities to take place. You can't rely upon the apostles in the first presidency to try to do all the historical documents and write them and proclaim the gospel to the world, travel all the time, and run, 100 million other things. They rely upon other individuals and as you should know from just reading the early days of the church, sometimes people do not make the best decisions, and sometimes they are corrupt and they purposely do evil and wrong things. And it spells out misery for many Latter-day Saints. And that's what's happening here. So we have this scenario where Bushman's is going to be the first volume in the series. And they go through it and they say, we're not publishing this. We're canceling the whole series because it is written in a way to ruin people's faith. Not because what they wrote is true and the church is trying to cover anything up, but because it is not true. And they are pulling in anti-Mormon sources that have been thoroughly vetted to be not credible. But yet they want to be accepted in the eyes of the world. And they want to create a psychoanalysis of what was the origin of the church and Joseph Smith and stuff. So they look at all the sources, including sources that are BS, and then they create theories about, well, it appears that this is how Joseph Smith came across the priesthood. He used magic. It was like a preparatory priesthood to him actually having the priesthood of God. Magic, things that are of the devil? Really? A family that you're saying this family practiced into magic, and you'll see in this book Bushman and rough stone rolling, because what he did was I need to backtrack. Bushman then took his manuscript and published it, finished writing it all, and because the church said we're not publishing this, but you can do what you're with, whatever you want to do with those manuscripts or with those histories you've been writing, but we're not publishing it. Bushman then takes that to publish Rough Stone Rolling, which is really an anti-Latter-day Saint book. The man, that book has caused many people to wander and lose their faith because there's a lot of lies in it. It allows us to believe things that are not true. We should not have to buy into lies in order to have good faith. And so you have him concocting this narrative about Joseph Smith and his family, saying things like they practiced magic, and also that the dad was Joseph Smith Sr. really didn't care about religion. The mom was really trying to get him to engage in religion, which is not true. This is a family that read scriptures, I believe it was twice a day. They prayed a lot. They believed heavily in the Bible. They were very, very religious. They believed in God heavily. Joseph Smith Sr., just because he did not officially align himself with a particular denomination in those early days, does not mean he was kind of meh about religion and the Bible and Christianity. It's not true at all. But that's the picture he paints. And more importantly, let's go to this. It says about Richard Bushman's book here. Oh, sorry. Before I go on to that, I just wanted to give me one moment. Oh yeah, this is just verifying this quote here, or this section is just saying, it's intriguing to note that the preliminary work of the Joseph Smith Papers project. Sorry. I wrote down an order to these things, but because I'm already deep into the Richard Bushman thing, I might as well just keep going there about some of the BS. When I say BS, I mean Blythe Spirit. Here's an example of him. So they give examples of him taking sources that are not credible, but they also give an example in which Richard Bushman literally misrepresented and quoted out of context something from Lucy Smith's own history to promote an idea that was very false, this magic idea. It says, referencing her autobiography, Bushman quotes Mother Smith, who recorded, I shall change my theme for the present, but not let my reader suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season, that we stopped our labor and went on at trying to win the faculty of abric drawing magic circles or soothsaying to neglect all kinds of business. We never during our lives suffered one important interest to swallow up another obligation, but whilst we worked with our hands, we endeavored to remember the service and welfare of our souls. Bushman then uses an entirely twisted interpretation of Lucy's words to argue his antithetic and discrepant beginnings of Mormonism. That, quote, the Smith family at first was no more able to distinguish true religion from superstitions than their neighbors. They were as susceptible to the neighbors' belief in magic as they were to the teachings of Orthodox ministers. Joseph's discovery of the seer stone and the revelation of Moroni and the gold plates confused them even further. The visit of the angel seemed to confirm the beliefs of their superstitious neighbors. Lucy revealed a knowledge of magic formulas and rituals. It seems likely that Joseph Smith Sr., stimulated by his son's supernatural experiences, searched for treasure with the help of his family. Understandably, Moroni's visit and the discovery of the seer stone appeared to confirm the entire culture of magic. So, you have him saying that, okay, obviously they could not distinguish between Christianity and the religious superstitions like their neighbors were involved in, which seems a bit odd, and he's pulling out Lucy Mack Smith as an example. It continues to say, later in Rough Stone Rolling, Bushman repeats the argument, claiming that Lucy's comment demonstrates, quote, the Smiths were as susceptible as their neighbors to treasure-seeking folklore. Magic and religion melded in Smith family culture. End quote. Did Mother Smith veritably admit to her family's involvement in magic and the occult? The answer is no, and it goes on to explain. Because she said, she's talking about one topic, she's going on to another, and as she's making this transition, she's trying to help people understand. As I'm going on, let's dispel some lies here. She says that let not my reader suppose that we went trying to win the faculty of abrek, which is like a form of magic stuff, during drawing magic circles or soothsaying. Let not my reader suppose that we did those things. But instead, he says, look, she said that we did these things. As she changes the focus of her narrative, continuing in the book, she wisely appears to be wary that someone could give credence to the lies then circulating about her family, such as the tales of Angel Moroni and gold plates were allegedly part of a magical treasure-digging career within a lazy family that had abandoned their honest farm labor in exchange for a chase after treasure buried in the earth. So she's aware of that being the narrative, that being the commentary about her and her family at the time. So she's just saying, oh, as I'm changing topics, let me just make sure that you don't suppose that we did these things, because we didn't. So either, like, you could say it's one of two things. Either Bushman is either so incompetent that he can't read her statement clearly enough and just is so biased that he just sees it as something that, oh, this confirms what I'm trying to say, or it's on purpose. Someone as smart as Bushman, I don't think that's the case. The sentence, the statement is so obvious. So now begs the question, all right, if the church didn't lie, what about this new series that's coming out, all the history of the Joseph Smith papers, and I would even throw in there the Saints' history stories. Like, does that contain some of these things that we should actually do away with that are not true? The answer is yes, because you have these same historians who either worked with Arrington and follow after him, or have been taught in this progressive tradition of history making, that it continues to distort our views. I mean, a really good example of this is in the History of the Saints. I think that's what it's called, the Latter-day Saints, the one that the church has been coming out with each volume. There's a episode, I think it was with it was the Stick of Joseph YouTube channel, which is a really great channel. They're interviewing, I forget his name, he's got a really awesome mustache, and is all about the Book of Mormon happening in America's heartland. He mentions that he knew that they had politicized, the Mesoamerica, Latter-day Saint, heartland theory. It's a very politicized sort of topic, and a lot of people struggle with it. And a lot of Latter-day Saints believe in the Mesoamerica thing, but there's a lot of statements and historical things about Joseph Smith that really point to Cumorah really being just the one Cumorah in New York, and the Nephites taking place in the eastern United States. And that this man knew from contacting them and asking why they were leaving these things out, that would not because he wanted this narrative to be promoted, but there's some really faith-promoting things that Joseph Smith did, and they were left out because it would offend the Mesoamerica idea. That's just one example of how what the church publishes and who's running the show can politicize, can change, or alter for particular, I'd say, political reasons. Well, that's the same thing with the Joseph Smith papers. You have this, let me get to here. It talks about how, it says, in 2005, the BYU department that had been created for Leonard Arrington and his team in the 1980s was closed. Many of the department's, this is chapter 19. Many of the department's scholars returned to the family and church history department in Salt Lake City, bringing with them a project originally conceived by Arrington's close friend, Dean Jesse. It was called the Joseph Smith Papers Project. It is intriguing to note that the preliminary work of the Joseph Smith Papers Project supported Bushman's Joseph Smith Rough Stone Rolling. The current National Advisory Board of the Joseph Smith Papers Project includes Richard L. Bushman, Terry L. Gibbons, and Dean C. Jesse, along with other scholars who have produced several publications promoting the progressive New Mormon history interpretation of Joseph Smith. So, be wary, and this goes back to the first video. If you haven't watched it, you should, about me reviewing this, is if you find yourself encountering sources, and sometimes they're even published by the church, because of those individuals within the church that the church has hired to do these things, whether maliciously or not, just the way they were taught, either they follow after this Arrington concept because they enthusiastically want a different view of the church promoted, or because they've just been taught to be progressive in the way they handle history and to create these psychoanalyses and take sources that are not credible. Either that's on purpose or it's just by incident because that's how they were trained to think, and they're following kind of everyone else's thing. A very big thing intellectuals do is, as one person does a corrupt thing and creates a mode or concept or a narrative, people will just continue to requote that narrative and create new narratives that continue to promote that narrative, and they're all quoting the same original narrative which had misquoted an original source or was fabricated altogether. It's a very normal thing to do in academia. So what I'm trying to say is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true Church of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ restored his church through Joseph Smith as his prophet. And that man, Joseph Smith, was an incredible human being, did amazing things, was holy and pure and good. And the Book of Mormon is true. The priesthood of God that we hold in this church doesn't have some strange, yucky beginnings. If you find yourself, going back to like what I've said in the other video, if you find yourself embracing content and ideas, doesn't matter if it's on YouTube or even published in journals, that seem to make you less enthusiastic and excited and maybe even want to distance yourself from the church, you have to question, okay, is it true? And if maybe it's not, or maybe it is, but all you have to do is you have to hold on to your faith and know, what has the Holy Ghost taught me to be true? Okay, then I can trust in the fact that these questions I have can be worked out later. And I don't need to see the church be fundamentally changed or transformed. I don't need to become some missionary for the new Mormon perspective or history. I just need to stay pure and true to the actual principles of the gospel and believe in the words of the prophets. Stay true to the prophet today and in the past, and love the Lord's servants, uphold them, and continue on your covenant path. Don't let yourself doubt. Put it aside. And if you have questions, I love talking with people who are struggling because they need love and support and help. Those who are struggling and are wanting answers or want help, not those who want to exit the church and bring as many people with them. I don't really care to talk to those individuals. They're of a spirit that I don't care to discuss. But those who genuinely are struggling, they need our love and support, and they need discussions. And it's faith promoting to say, hey, but we don't know, we don't fully understand, but this is what I do know, and this is what I do understand. Maybe there's some misrepresentation going on, but this is the Lord's prophet, or whatever it might be. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Did the church lie? No, I don't believe so at all. The church and its history is so glorious. We should rejoice in it. It's so wonderful. And I really encourage everyone, I feel like this was something I commented on over and over in the comment section of the other book, of the other review. Buy the darn book, read it, understand it. It will really increase your faith. Embrace content books and things that will help you grow in your enthusiasm for Christ's church and his leaders. And grow your testimony. Be filled with light. Don't make yourself feel apologetic about the church existing or whatever else. It is wonderful and glorious. It is Christ's church. So what do you think? What questions do you have? I want to know, what questions are you still left with? Like genuine questions like, well, what about this? How do we understand that? I don't have all the answers, but I know my testimony. I know in whom I have trusted. In Jesus Christ and the Holy Ghost that has borne witness to my soul. Please like and comment. Please actually share this with other people so more can have their testimonies grown and impacted in a positive way by this. And hopefully together we can dispel this darkness and this confusion and spread the gospel with more enthusiasm and vigor than ever before. Thank you so much.